is what do you feel is wisdom? What is wisdom according to you? So let's dive in with that.
Yeah, so for me, wisdom, when kind of put that question, it was a very spontaneous and very clear answer. For me, wisdom is the ability and the capacity to do what's right for the moment
Mm-hmm.
with complete conviction,
Mm-hmm.
and yet be open to receive all its consequences.
So you're saying three things right now with full conviction and willing to take its consequences also. Lovely. I'm wondering if there's, I think there is value in unpacking each of these three because you have given a very strong essence. So let me just quickly get a sense of what you mean by each one. So in the moment is, I'm guessing, here and now, right? Like when you say in the moment, it's spontaneous.
It's spontaneous, yes, but it is also very, very informed by the reality that exists right there, right then.
Hmm.
And when I say reality, multiple realities that exist right there, right
In
then.
that moment.
In,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in the context, the people around me, my own reality, being present to all of that, and then
Hmm.
take a call right there.
That what's the action in that moment,
In that moment, what is the most needed.
which you're saying also has to come with conviction. So it's almost like you're standing in a very in the moment ground, but you're saying it has to come with conviction, which traditionally is associated with some form of belief or rigidities, right? Like sounds opposite.
Yeah, so for me, conviction uh, doesn't necessarily mean rigidity. Conviction means a power, as you said, a power, a belief, and it's and the belief in it, saying that I stand with it. This is my opinion based on, and this is my action. This is my commitment to the action based on how I see it right now. Because if I don't back it up with conviction,
Mm,
then it's open to all kinds of interpretations. It's open to all kinds of vacillations. It's open to, you know, how shall I say it? Yeah. So for me, conviction is very important. And I'm just asking myself, even as I'm answering you, that why is that important? Because to me, it creates clarity, it creates incisiveness, it inspires commitment from others,
mm.
and it also compels others to clarify their stances.
Lovely, lovely. Yes, yes. Yeah, I am tempted to probe there, but I'll complete this cycle and then maybe come back. You
Right.
said willingness to then deal with the consequences of that action. In the moment करूंगा, conviction के साथ करूंगा, and गलत हुआ तो भी I'll own it. Is that what you mean by willingness to own
Absolutely,
consequences?
because I am also human. I will never have a complete view of reality. I may have, I may take multiple realities into account. I might be present to many, many things at that same moment. But the fact is that other people are there and other circumstances are there. Uh, so the completing that reality or completing the action related to that reality will come in with the flavors of each person and what they think, and hence it will have consequences
Hmm.
because the dynamics of interaction at that moment will be defined by many factors that are beyond me, so I have to be willing to take the consequences.
And people being people, this can consequences can be of any types. Like one can never fully predict the consequences of such action.
Absolutely, and being open to consequences, not only because of some kind of bravado, but to me, it is being open to consequences in terms of being in a space of learning, because the reaction out there will tell me or that how what my diagnosis in that moment is, or how I have intervened. whether I am, my conviction has done something to others.
Hmm.
Because that's a great opportunity to calibrate myself and my thought process and my action further.
Hmm. 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 And is it fair to say that that makes you the source of your conviction then, because you're taking the risk of
Absolutely.
that kind of action?
Because I'm taking total responsibility in that moment.
Risk and responsibility, I would say, because if I locate it in myself, I'm like, wow, taking a spontaneous, like taking a in the moment action with full conviction can go anywhere. And that is like the approval seeking Abhishek in me is like, no, 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 don't risk it. Like, be a little more diplomatic about it, be a little more calculative about it. So I think yeah, I'm hearing, as you say, the rawness of that action. I think that's what I'm picking up, like a raw action coming from the core of your being. I think that's what's coming to me.
Interesting you say that, Abhishek, because that being calculative and all of that is to me indicative of fear. And
Yeah,
and for me, wisdom is fearless. If it's wise, it comes from a place of not infected by fear or polluted by
nothing to
fear.
fear.
Because if it is polluted by fear, it's clever, not wise.
Ah, that's a nice one. If there is fear, it's cleverness. If there's no fear, it's wisdom. Beautiful, beautiful. True, true, true. So I'm holding a question of what is the fearless question I can ask you right now. And I think I'm going to ask you a question which is to do with when you look at your own life and we're talking about how to live a self determined life. Have you lived a self determined life? And from when did you move to a self determined life? And what is, yeah, let me ask you to look at yourself objectively and tell me where would you place yourself? I think that's the most daring question I can ask in the moment. So I'm going to go for that.
Uh, so I think before I answer that question, I also want to point out that self-determined is not a destination but a dynamic phenomena
It's an ongoing.
process. Because what is self is also changing all the time.
Mm, mm, mm,
And what does determination mean? Either in terms of conviction or coming to a conclusion
mm,
or diagnosing, also is changing moment to moment. So for me, self-determination really is a conscious capacity to be built. Uh, if you look up some of the work, like Keegan's work, he calls self-authoring, right? So to me, that's
mm,
probably
mm,
a close one. If you see Maslow's work, he calls about self-actualization, right? So some of these terminologies, while they were words when I read them a few years back, but I think I have started to realize, they have started to dawn upon me saying, what do they really mean?
mm, mm,
So I think one thing I want to establish is it's a dynamic phenomena. So have I lived it? Yes, I've strived to live it. That is how I would say.
mm, mm, mm,
And what I became aware of about 15 years back is that uh, there is a socialized mindset that I had. I mean, I still do in many ways, right? And there's still revelations that happen how socialized I am, and how my choice may be driven more by what's outside of me rather than determined by myself. Is an ongoing phenomena. But to go back to 15 years, I think the intensity and frequency of my choice making, uh, based on the socialized mindset,
mm,
was a lot more. Uh, and That is where I started asking myself the question that, uh, or I rather, I think the first phase was to come in touch with a certain restlessness with it,
mm, mm,
and not knowing, right? It's like कुछ हो रहा है लेकिन क्या हो रहा है पता नहीं.
mm, mm,
A
mm,
very scary place to be in, very dark place to be in. That while everything outside looks great, but inside there is the sense of loss of meaning, loss of relevance, loss of grounding, loss of convictions, Uh, I mean, loss of spontaneity that you talked about.
Hmm. Hmm.
So everything seemed to have. It was almost like a chess game I was
Hmm.
playing. Every choice would become a choice chess game. So to stand in my own self was very difficult, and that was the first phase. The second phase was to come to realization that I'm living roles. That's all. That
Hmm.
I'm living a role of a son, father, boss, husband, colleague, etc., etc. And I was stuck in those roles. And those roles made me made it so it's a yeah, so that was the chessboard, right? So
The roles
the
and
role,
navigating them.
yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
those were the pieces, right. Yeah, आज ये वाली चाल चलनी, आज फादर का रोल प्ले करना है तो ये
Wow, I can so relate to that one. Yes.
so
Yes.
it had
Yes.
become a chal, right? It was a strategic, everything
Yes.
had to be a
Yes.
strategic move, right? And in that process, who am I is something that got lost. So for me, self-determined life has been a continuous discovery of who am I.
Beautiful. Hmm.
I don't know if that's the question answer you were looking for, but
No, I hear you. I think what I'm curious about is this restlessness is a feeling perhaps many people feel, but choose either to suppress it or ignore it or hope it goes away, or numb themselves. And you chose not to do any of those, but to start off on a journey of exploration, which has brought you where you are today. And you also enable individuals who I feel come with that restlessness to take to your program to do that journey. So I'm just curious, firstly, about you, and then maybe others. What enables people to take the risk of exploration rather than suppress that restlessness? Like there must be कुछ तो होगा उनमें कि वो लोग चल पड़े exploration पे. क्या था वो?
if I had an answer to that question, I think Buddha spent 14 years doing that, Abhishek. You're asking me that.
Hmm.
I think that's a very tough one to answer because I can say what it was for me,
Hmm. Hmm.
but what it will be for any other person is so hard to tell. Because I've seen 19-year-olds who are far more conscious and aware and wanting to explore that wild. And I have seen 70-year-olds who have spent their entire life, you know, with that voice quietened and deadened and, just
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
lying in there and they're okay with that, right? Uh, so I can what I can say from my own experience is that the cost of being who I was being, it just became too high for me. Never, it just the voice became so loud
Hmm.
that there would be that it wouldn't let me sleep in the night. It would haunt me when I'm making choices of like the simplest kind. I would see my loved ones being impacted around me because of who I was being. I could see that despite all the tick marks that the world says you should do, like go to this college, do this, get married, have kids, acquire a house, all of that. Like सब तो कर लिया लेकिन still you look doesn't look like that. It looks like it doesn't help
Hmm.
me at least.
Hmm.
Doesn't help me at least. Uh, so I I think if you ask me that while there was all this restlessness, Abhishek, I think even right now as I'm talking to you, uh, the one gift that I kind of ignored for a till that point in time, this was in my late 30s, which I realized then was the gift that I got from my upbringing and family uh, was an immense gift of authenticity,
Hmm.
and that the, you know, the lack of authenticity in my life, the fact that I was living an inauthentic life, that what was inside and what was outside, was a very huge crisis of meaning for me. So if you ask me what helped me move and listen to that voice, was not only to listen to the restlessness, but also be present to a certain gift that came my way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, because as much as the restlessness pulls you down, you also need a rope from the well to pull you up. And my rope was authenticity.
So what about success then, Sanju? I think just as an IIM person at a IT company, you've been abroad, you're doing like you're at the edge of a sector which is booming and like success, right? And I guess our by training management trains you to be successful. I don't know, didn't self doubt around success coming? Because so many times it's just so much comfortable to hold on to a success, even if internally it's hopeless, but externally there is success. So, what was your relationship with success, and has that changed over time?
The first spontaneous uncensored thought that comes to my mind is success started sucking after a while.
Success started sucking. Wow. Hmm, hmm. That's
Uh,
a new one. Success started sucking after all. Nobody says success sucks, so it's interesting you saying that. Wow.
because those were standards defined by the society, the people around me, the tick boxes that I mentioned, right? Uh, to and it it was a drug. That success was a drug because it rewarded the outside world rewarded that behavior to play those roles, right? So be predictable, be achievement oriented, like everything, right? Like the ideal models of being a man, being in at work, being a man at family, being the responsible son, all those scripts were very uh, would feed that this is what success means. Yeah. So for me, self-determined life is as much about defining what does success mean to you.
Hmm, hmm,
And till we continue to, you know, live by the standards of success that are defined around us, we continue being clever. What's the next way to next promotion, next home, next this thing? So, and I think wisdom to me is to come to the conclusion saying, okay, all these matter only so far. They matter,
hmm,
definitely. I
hmm,
would never say that. I mean, it would be easy for me to diss all of that today, but the fact is that where I stand today is also because of all those experiences I went through and the rewards that I got from it, right? So, but it's a question of so far, right? So a self-determined life cannot happen unless you understand and own up the fact that you are living a socialized life. So yeah. So yeah, success means very different things to me today.
and those are your own crafted, your uniquely crafted version, which is for yourself, right? A very customized Sanjay success, like not the success or social success, but what it is in your eyes, right? A very private
Yeah, yeah,
success.
yeah. But I also don't want it to feel like a sanitized in vacuum kind of a definition, right? My own definitions of success will have no meaning or relevance if they are not in the context,
Hmm, hmm.
right?
Sure.
I still live in society, family, work, colleagues, clients, all of that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so I have to be, so I might take stances from my definition of success and yet be open to the consequences, saying that context around me will react in a certain way.
Hmm, hmm.
right? And some costs I may be willing to pay, but some costs I still find hard to play. And hence I may, kind of then they get into a dialogue about, what does it mean? And then sometimes I may just say, नहीं होगा भाई.
That's such a brave act in itself to say nahi hoga bhai. And then somehow this is moving for me. Two, three things are connecting. So I'm just going to throw them and see what you have as response. One is the roles, the chessboard imagery that you said, and roles, and I can so relate to it. Like wanting to be 9 out of 10 marks in every role I play. Like was that's the standard, right? And the roles, and
No,
somehow something
some
about being
cases
a
I wanted to be 11 on 10, by the way.
yeah, let's max it out.
Like standard.
Let's push that one.
Uh,
So 11 or 10, and something about being a man just showed up for me because we've also done men's work together and men and roles. And last thing that you finally said कि नहीं होगा, being able to say कि भाई नहीं होगा. Somehow these three link for me in some way. I don't know. So not able to form a question, but I think the way I would form it is as a man. What is the that journey, and how does that connect to the self-determined life and the capacity to say nahi hoga, which I don't know. I would struggle in the past to say nahi hoga, like ego pe aega yaar, nahi kaise hoga types. So I don't know. Just curious about how do you see your journey as a man, and where does that interplay with the roles and the nahi hoga and self-determined life?
at a very simple level, as they say, pick your battle, that's wisdom, right?
Wisdom is picking your battles. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So नहीं होगा तो ठीक है ना. I mean, like, live to fight another day यार, और क्या.
Sure, live to fight another day. Yeah, yeah.
uh, so that's part of it, yes. And yeah, I agree with you that the male socialization is about lage raho. How can you, give up? How can you back off? And yeah, and I so had to confront so much of that when I went into my journey for, exploring who am I in the first few years of my life. First few years of this transition from my previous life to a more self-determined life. That how much of the socialized mind was of saying, as a man, I have to be the provider. There is no option for me. As a man, I cannot become second. I have to be first.
Yes.
Right, in the race of life, I'll be left behind. Yeah. As a man, if I stop earning, for example, I'll be seen as a failure. I'll fail as a gender, forget as a role.
Yes.
My entire being will be denied, because I did see a lot of that around me as well, including, some of the family where if they were not, men were not earning, or men were not being, the power figures out there and in the family, then they would be considered as failures, and there would be stigma around it. There would be, all kinds of family talk, etc., etc. And so I saw all of that play out. Um so yeah, I agree with you that as much as women get trapped into certain kinds of roles, uh, the men get trapped into these kind of identities, that, these kind of roles, uh, and then they play chess with themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, surely that. Curious what gives you so much energy, Sanjay. I see you as somebody who's got like passion for like life ka maza. That's how you seem to be like, whether you cook or the way you dress or the way you just live life. What drives you? What's that source of energy that keeps you so alive? कहाँ से आ रही है?
Well, some credit must go to my Punjabi roots, I guess. Uh,
Hmm.
and I mean it half seriously, because yes, I have seen a household that I grew up in an environment where zest for life was all around me. That despite the struggle, despite um, all the challenges, celebrations were like so much part of life. Um, and I just recently read a quote by somebody which really stayed with me, that which said, "What you celebrate sustains."
Wow, what you celebrate sustains. Beautiful.
And I can see back, look back at my life now, that so much of what was celebrated as an event, or so much of what's the celebration that came of a certain way of living or family, food, festivals, all of that. You know the simple joys of life, that they definitely, that has contributed to who I am. So for somebody who is actually been quite a covert and sometimes even overt rebel, trying to go
Mhm.
away from traditions. And if you go back to my actual, extended family, they're very, very different from me, hold very different values, have very taken very
Mm-hmm.
different paths in life. It's only in the last few years I have owned up and started to recognize that how much in that chain of life, uh,
Mm.
had the chain of life, how much it has nurtured and fed me over the years.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
I'm quite very, very grateful to it, and have been making very conscious attempt to honor it by at least being present to it, being present to people from that. I may not connect with them, I may not feel like belonging to them, but I definitely feel like honoring them, saying that thank you for what you've done for me. So that's one. Two is I think the second thing that I that has sustained me often through is which again is a gift from the past in some sense, that comes from my mother's side, and her, that art has been a huge, huge support through this process. I often say, and during COVID days, it became even more apparent to me that till science find an answer, then art will keep us alive.
Wow. Till science finds an answer, art will keep us alive. Lovely.
And so true last year, right? When lockdown and all of that, there's such a burst of creativity online, with music, being offered, free concerts being offered, and all of that. And during that time, science had no answer, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and all that kept our spirit going, at least my spirit going, at least I know, and thousands others that I heard, was that. And to me, that's something that that inheritance has definitely helped. That whenever I have come to difficult emotions, difficult phases of my life, I found a way of expressing it, because art gives us the power to express,
Hmm. Hmm.
whether it be acting, drama, any of those. And I think that has kept me going. Okay, that gives me zest for life. And what else? Relationships, definitely. Yeah. Uh,
Sure.
from the romantic to the serious, from the banal to the meaningful, all in the whole spectrum. Yeah. So conversations like this you and I are having, the relationship that we've had for so many years. Uh, this, these give me rest for life, because it's like every time I interact with you or any other significant relationship like this, like it a whole new world opens up. Yeah, I mean, like
Hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
that that's like a rabbit hole again, right? Saying, okay, ek aur, come, let's go and explore this.
Hmm. And
So
so satisfying also. It's so gratifying. So
yeah,
really grateful for that. I think nurturing those relationships is also such a intentional thing to do.
absolutely.
So I was curious, संजू, एक किसी कविता की एक लाइन जो अभी आपके दिल में फ्लटर हो रही है.
बोले बाप
You write very beautifully, and so I was like, right now I wonder if he had to just pluck a line from one of the many beautiful poems, if there is any that's coming to you, that is like a pet line, or like a line captures something for you in this moment. Would anything come to you right now? And it's suddenly coffee with current kind of a spot question. We can.
हाँ, the challenge is I don't remember my poems.
Oh, okay.
They happen to me spontaneously. They come out, they just flow out of me. I mean, there are times when
Hmm.
I've written poems and then I will read them saying, "Acha, oh, ye likha hai." Right? So
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
is what was wanting to come out of me, kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, but um, yeah. So maybe yeah, like the one thing that's coming to me, and I will need to uh, is will you be okay if I just pull that up for a second?
Sure, we can allow a little bit of that to hear some of Sanjay the poet, and also the singer. Actually, Sanjay, I just remembered I loved the first time you sang. I loved not only the voice but jitna dil se you sang Ore Piya. I'll never forget. I was like, wow, that was good. Not just because of the voice, but this guy really enjoyed singing. I'm like, this is a good way to sing. I like it. It was, I don't know if you remember that. It was you singing Ore Piya then.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, these are the expressions that come through, and for me, hence, it's not a the same song will come out very differently with different people and different circumstances because
Hmm.
it's an expression for that moment, uh, because that's what's wise for the
In
moment.
that moment, it's wise to express it in
Yeah.
that way. And I think I'm almost what I'm picking up is it's not a rehearsed song that sounds every time the same, but you're present to that context and expressing in that context. And so the song has a flavor of that moment, almost like that. And that's the wise, alive, sensitive response to the moment.
Yeah.
Hmm. तो क्या हमें कोई पंक्तियां मिलेंगी सुनने?
हाँ जी, जरूर। लेकिन फिर दो नहीं, फिर 8-10 सुननी पड़ेंगी,
चलेगा,
चलेगा?
आने दीजिए.
Yeah, so since we're talking about self-determined life, this was my journey, my understanding of self-determined life. A few years back, I wrote it. Maybe this would have been in 7-8 years back. Yeah. So, um, कविता है सपनों को गाना होगा,
सपनों को गाना होगा,
उगाना होगा।
उगाना होगा.
ठीक है। कुछ दिन हुए एक आसमान का टुकड़ा धम से पैरों के बगल गिर गया। अचकचाकर जब घूमा मैं, उस जनाब बोले, ओए मैं तेरा हूँ, रख ले जेब में मुझको। क्यों कर रखूं इस बोलते गिरले टुकड़ों को, ना जाने कब उछल पड़े फिर किसी अनजानी आस के पीछे। क्या पता आसमां ही गरज से मांग ले अपनी इस नटखट धरोहर को, और रख भी लिया तो क्या करूंगा इसका, इस नीली स्वच्छंदता का, इसकी बेडौल निराकरता का। कितना बदतमीज भी तो है, कुछ भी सांसारिक सुशीलता नहीं। ओए खेत में बंधे सांड सा कब तक खूंटे पर रहेगा। सक पकाकर कनखियों से ताका और झट रख लिया उस उज्जट को। रोज सुबह अब एक बार देख लेता हूँ, कल मेरे सपनों की कोपलें फूटती दिखाई पड़ी थीं। झिझक, अचंभे, हिचक में ही सही मेरे आसमां का टुकड़ा मिल ही गया। कुछ खुरदुरा, कुछ बेडौल, सुनहरे सपनों से कुछ अलग। कौन कहता है मुकम्मल जहां नहीं मिलता। बिखरे पड़े हैं आसमां कई ख्वाबों के आगोश को बेकरार। पागल मैं ऊंट सा, उम्मीद भरी नजर दूर, और भीड़ के कोलाहल से भरे कान रेत से फिसल गए पैरों तले कितने आसमान। सपनों को सजोना नहीं, सपनों को उगाना होगा।
Hmm.
जाने कब कौन बदसूरत टुकड़ा बन जाए आब एक चुलबुले ख्वाब की।
Wow.
And so for me, that voice that spoke out of nowhere, listening to it, nurturing it, uh, recognizing that, uh, ignoring that voice led to ignoring so many moments of awareness, moments of possibilities, moments of who I am.
Hmm.
Being present to that, uh, and and hence, and in what form, what shape that voice will come in, we don't know.
Hmm. Hmm.
The only thing that we can do is hopefully pay attention to it.
This is such a point to pause the talk, but I'm not going to do it. But this is a great point to pause this talk and say yes. It's like a mic drop moment. So I'm just going to pause to just cherish what you've just shared. Thanks for sharing that invitation to listen to the voice. Uh, be so silent to be able to listen to it, to regard it. I think, irrespective of what shape or form it takes, and
Yeah.
doing that again and again, I guess.
Yeah. Mm, recognize that it won't be what you imagined it to be,
Sure.
what the world around you tells you should be.
Yeah. अपना ही कुछ. Yeah. Yeah, so this is beautiful. I would love to stay with this, and I will perhaps stay. The lingering sense of what you've shared will stay. उसकी खुशबू रहेगी. I wanted to go a little into your thinking about being rooted in Indianness, because I do know you've been thinking about what is it to be rooted in our culture, and you work with so many people also across both globally and locally. So just curious about two things, and you can pick which one. One is, what is it to be rooted in our Indianness? What is it to be rooted in being Indian? I've seen you flowering in other cultures like Bejijak. So I'm curious about what is that brand of Indianness that you hold, and what is. So let me ask you that first. Yeah, what is it to be Indian? What is the Indianness that you root yourself in?
Hmm. Yeah, so first of all, I want to clarify Indian doesn't mean a national identity for me.
Sure.
To me, political boundaries are actually very painful. I mean, they literally feel like, lines in the sand are lines in between hearts. Uh, Especially coming from a Punjabi refugee family which migrated, that I know the trauma very personally and closely, what it can do. Uh, Having said that, Indianness to me means certain culture, certain people that we are, and by the virtue of our history, culture, geography, all the threads that come from there. Um, so for me, Indianness means that we have the gift and the wisdom of so many thousands of years. Uh, the sadness that I felt, and which is where my attempts to reconnect with it has been there, um, that I got the rituals but not the wisdom
Mm.
of my past. Yeah, so somewhere the disconnect, the lack of literally an idiom to engage with Indianness has been a big challenge. Having said that, the more I access it, the more I I'm able to connect the whole to the part that I am, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
there are all these moments where I'm like, oh, I am like this because this is how, this is where it comes from, right? So whether it be a deep dive into a mythology or a simple story that I read in Amar Chitra Katha, or a question that my child asks me about, why are we the way we are? Um, it really wakes me up to the questioning. So the one is Indianness to me means a very rich uh, source of wisdom that one can and should tap into. Two is it means that I exist in context. Context is always around. So for me, the individual and the context are not different, and it's the interface of the two where all the interesting stuff happens.
mm, mm.
So, like my own life of you know, self-determined life happened because of what was happening at the interface of me and my context.
Mm, mm.
Um Indianness to me also means a sense of time that is very timeless, uh, and yet very anxious.
Mm, mm.
What I mean by that is that there's a there's an interesting polarity that I see being manifested. That at one end we say that अच्छा अगले जन्म में हो जाएगा ये पिछले जन्म का है, right? So there is that you know
Mm.
time is running, and there's something beyond us. Time is beyond us, right? And
Mm, mm.
time will, and yet we are the crazy drivers on the road, weaving through the traffic, being so anxious
Yeah.
about beating the next guy, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
True. The
polarity,
paradoxes of our culture, yeah, like we pretty much hold these
yeah,
opposites almost, and they're true.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and yeah, so the paradoxes, dilemmas, all of that we hold. So for me, I'm very happy and owning up and living with being in constant dialogue
In dialogue, yeah.
with myself, with the world around, with there is over a period of time, the way I've resolved it for myself is is to relieve myself of all these anxieties कि कहीं पहुंचना है.
Really dropping that anxiety के कहीं पहुंचना है. Wow.
That's why if you remember, I said self-determined to me is an evolving process. It's not like
Hmm. Hmm.
अच्छा अब ये life हो गई, right? So Uh, so, to give you an example, you talked about Take Two, the program that we run, and we recently created a model out of it based on the experience of doing it for 70 participants, where we talked about how you break through the socialized mindset basically and live a more self-determined life. And interestingly, the model is in the true Indian tradition is a spiral circular one, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? And when we reached the last stage where we said, okay, somebody has done their take two, they are like living the life they want to lead, that they're self-determined, right? And we were actually capturing what are the traps of this stage, and we said the trap of this stage is that you start believing that life is about sustaining this pleasure or avoiding pains.
Hmm. 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 You want to extend that zone of yeah.
Yeah, and and you have to come to and the only way out is that to come to the acceptance that life is inherently ambiguous, volatile, uncertain. Unless you come to terms with that, you're again going to go back to the first stage. So self-determined life is not a destination. Self-determined life is acceptance of the inherent scary nature of life.
Wow. Wow. And the final acceptance that it's always going to be कॉम्प्लेक्स एम्बिगुअस कभी सेटल नहीं होने वाली है जब भी सेटल लग रहा है आके इट विल नॉक यू ऑफ टू समथिंग न्यू या 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 ब्यूटीफुल
But then that's where the potential is also, right?
यस यस
That's where the new exploration is. That's where the rest of life comes from.
yes the freshness of the possibilities and the yeah definitely. So maybe a last question, and then we can open this up for audience to type out their questions in the chat. Was Sanjay, why are we the way we are? And I want to just elaborate. Like you could say, we as Indians or we as human beings, because you work with you're a coach to so many people over so many years, or humanity, right? And you, I love when you come up with images that flash for you. And if you had to, if there is any image coming up about humanity ki halat, where we are. So just curious about why are we the way we are, and if any images you want to paint about it. I don't know. So yeah, just bringing you into that. Having seen so many people, so many like, what are those 2 3 things that you'd say ye ho raha
Hmm. It's a pretty big question.
hai? उतना तो बनता है यार संजय.
I'm not feeling very competent enough to answer that yet.
But trust me, your answer will be informed by way more data than any of us, because just seeing how intensely you work with people personally and collectively, I think I yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's the same thing coming back to me, Abhishek, that um, we are addicted to predictability.
Hmm.
And that makes us want to control people, control resources, control futures, uh, and the inherent ability to be with fears, live, you know, live with fears. And when I say live with fears, not necessarily live fearfully, but to use fear as information and fuel for making wiser decisions
Hmm. Use fear as information and fuel to make wiser decisions. Lovely. Hmm. Hmm.
is something that I think we could all do much better at. And um, so, yeah, so for me, and that's the answer today. It might change.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's this the human tendency or human propensity to want predictability is is, is something that we need to de-addict ourselves from, and that's what would make us freer. That's what would make us fearless. That's what would make us paradoxically also a lot more sensitive to each other and to the world around us.
Hmm.
Because when we operate from fears, we are connecting and relating comes from control.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
When we open ourselves vulnerably with our fears, uh, then real connection happens, and real solutions can emerge. More creative solutions can emerge.
Wow, lovely. I'm not going to extend this with more questions. I think this is already a beautiful, beautiful space to pause. And I love how you essentialized it to addiction to predictability. It's beautiful, it's elegant, and it's lovely. I'm not seeing too many questions from the audience yet, so I am going to pause here. And if any final thoughts, Sanjay, anything in context of a wisdom talk, anything else that you would like to add, since we are on the subject of wisdom, or anything you may have wanted to share and a question didn't take you there, anything that's coming up at all that you'd like to leave us with?
Uh, well, First of all, thank you for providing this space because I've articulated many things which uh, I hadn't earlier, including this last big question that you asked me. Very helpful. Uh, so yeah, yeah. I just want to also leave one caution that sometimes self-determined life can sound like and feel like living selfishly.
Mm, mm,
Uh, and I think one of the challenges of you said about Indianness, right? So one of the challenges of Indianness is that taking care of self is often labeled as selfish. The context has judgments about it. So when I went about exploring who am I and expressing myself and my needs, I got a lot of flashback. Um, and that's not easy to deal with, and which is probably why some of us stay stuck in those that socialized life. Uh, but I think the only thing that I would say that in that regard is that continuing to take care of others or continuing to take care of your context without taking care of yourself
mm.
is unsustainable and a complete cop out. In fact, the most unselfish acts can happen when you have taken care of yourself in a complete way. And when I say take care of yourself, I mean you're aware of who you are, what your derailers are, what what are some of the things that you are capable of unleashing on others with even with best of intentions, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Unless you have taken care of all of that.
Mm, mm,
So I would encourage anybody to take on this journey of self-determination, knowing that there will be a phase where you will face lashback in our culture, especially. In the Western world, individualism will probably be far more acceptable, uh, but there will be that cost to pay for a while. But the eventual benefits are far, far more.
thanks for sharing that. And there is a take two coming up, Sanjay, isn't it? Do we have a take two coming up soon?
Yes, so we have our next batch starting pretty much month from now on 11th of November, uh, and a 3 month journey to help people not only discover, uncover, but redesign and actually act towards creating a more self-determined life.
Yes, and I can endorse it at multiple levels. I've been in spaces facilitated by you. I've been spaces where we have co-held the space, and I have spoken to participants of Take Two as well. And on all three counts, I would really, really invite all those people who are listening in and who'd like to be on this journey of self-determination to definitely join in. I think it's a beautiful journey and a labor of love, Sanjay. I think you crafted it. I've been around as you crafted it and nourished it with all your heart and love. So yeah, I hope people take on this invitation that you're making and go on this journey. And here's to more and more people who are living their own truth, more self-determined people.